Hi, I'm Nicolai. I'm a Java developer for like about 10 years now, and I usually call myself a Java geek and someone who's interested in learning about Java and then sharing what I learned about Java. So I'm mostly spending time on recent Java features, like the module system when it was recent, and like stuff like sealed classes that are now very new. And I try to learn about them, and then I try to write a blog post or make a video or give a conference talk about that. So really, I'm regurgitating new Java features from the mailing lists and the JEPs into the wider community for fun so far. So I've been using IntelliJ IDEA since, and I had to look that up since 2015, pretty precisely. I switched companies in 2015 and went working for Disi Informationssysteme, which is a local company here in Karlsruhe. And while before I was working on smaller projects, the project I started working on there is almost as old as Java is. It had like 1.2, 1.4 million lines of code at the time and was split in about 400 Maven modules. And most people were using either Eclipse or NetBeans. But the problem was that at the time, the Eclipse Maven integration was not good enough, was not performant enough to actually import like 400 Maven modules into M2 as a proper Maven-based Eclipse project. That just didn't work. So instead, what we do would use the Maven Eclipse target and just generate all the Maven all the Eclipse files, and then use Eclipse based on that. But you lose something in the translation. For example, back at the time, not sure whether that's still the case, a test dependency would just show up on your regular class path, and so you could start having dependencies on your test dependencies accidentally. Within the IDE, you wouldn't know. You would only know when you ran the Maven build. And because not everybody runs a Maven build of a 400 sub-project large project, sometimes you would have everything work locally, but the build would fail. And that dissonance, that was always, not always, but it came up again and again as a problem, right? In your normal development cycle, you would just do something and build something and push it, and then the build would fail. Well, because you didn't build it before locally. So you would then check it out and then actually have to run the build. And this dissonance or this impedance mismatch was annoying me a lot. And then there was a new colleague who said, like, look, why don't we just use IntelliJ? We were a bit bound to Eclipse because we used some translation mechanisms that Eclipse supported well. But other than that, we're pretty IDE agnostic. So he invested a bit of time. Robert Ledermüller is his name, and I thank him to this day for introducing me to IntelliJ. So he would, make the remaining parts of the project that were dependent on Eclipse. He would remove those, or rather, not remove, but improve those, so would no longer be dependent on an IDE. And then we could start using IntelliJ without having any downside. And because back then you could actually import 400 Maven modules into a single IntelliJ project and would get the full support of Maven, meaning you would get exactly the same behavior as you got from Maven. And that for me was the sole reason to switch. Back at the time, I did not feel like Eclipse was a bad IDE or IntelliJ was so much better. I just felt like, okay, this is something that I need, so I want to switch to IntelliJ. And then for like a week or two, I fought with the Eclipse shortcuts because there's a keyboard shortcut layout for IntelliJ that looks like the Eclipse one, but it's not quite the same. And the IDEs have different philosophies of how things work. So after like a week or two, I just gave up and embraced IntelliJ wholeheartedly, and I've never looked back. So once again, I never had a bad time with Eclipse, but I felt from the first day that I just liked IntelliJ more. And it's hard to pinpoint why. Maybe it's just because it was a cool new thing. Who knows? We're sometimes shallow like that with us developers. But yeah, that was how it started. So it was a very specific technical reason that drove me to IntelliJ. OK, so before I start using IntelliJ IDEA, I start using the toolbox. And within the first 10 seconds, I launched the toolbox and check whether there's a new early access build of IntelliJ, because I'm always on the newest version because it so well supports new language features, but more on that later. Once I started IntelliJ, the first thing I do is open the project view, if it's not open already, look at the Git view to see whether there's new commits and which changes I have lying around, because I often have changes and I need to look at them and basically go back into the situation I was back then. And they usually launch the embedded terminal for Java development, not that much, but just for other stuff, I do a bunch of things on the side on the terminal. So I usually have a look at that as well. Just open it and maybe run like a Git command there or like an ls to just get my bearings a bit better. So that's the project view, Git view, and embedded terminal. Those are the 3 first things I start. So as I mentioned earlier, when I switched from Eclipse to IntelliJ, I didn't feel that Eclipse was a bad idea, and I didn't immediately think that IntelliJ was much better. But over time, I felt like I do enjoy IntelliJ more. And I never quite got to the bottom of this, but I think the reason is that it's an editor first, right? So you have a ton of things like your project view and the Git view and whatever I just mentioned, the Maven view and all of that. But in the center, it's an editor. And you can always very easily go back, put the focus back onto the editor. And just the rest seems to be an editor plus X, whereas Eclipse always felt like a bunch of plugins or a bunch of things that are on the same level as one another. But in IntelliJ, there's more focus on the editing experience. So that's that. I'm not sure whether that actually makes sense, but that's what I feel like. Also, there's an editor everywhere. Like I adore that you can just have, before a commit, you just in the Git diff view, we're like, oh, I need to remove the comment, or I don't know, there's a to-do that I still need to add, or whatever. You can just write code within many different views, not only the ones that are actually meant as an editor. Like, for example, the search view, right? You can have a search open, you can just change code right then and there. And the other thing that I really like about IntelliJ is very important to me, because, as I mentioned, I experiment a lot with new language features. And IntelliJ is always really, really quick to support those. And it's just better to write code in an IDE without having to fight with all the red squiggly lines. I mean, you can always combine on the command line, right, even for experiments. But it's still enjoyable to just have your full IDE support for experiments with sealed classes, for example. Yeah, so the feature that I definitely can't live without, but that might be just me, is presentation mode. I stream a lot on Twitch. I give a lot of conference talks. Many of them, not many of them, but some of them are live coding. And so I'm often in a situation where I want to show what I'm doing in the IDE, but your regular resolution is just not. It's just stuff is too small, right? If I have a 4K screen here, so I have a full HD window that's like half the width. If I just stream something like that, you can't see anything. So presentation mode makes it really easy to upscale not just the editor window, but everything else as well. Whatever menu I go in, whatever pop-up shows up, all of that is on the right size to be presented. And that makes it very convenient for me to switch into presentation mode for the presentations, for presentations that I give. And I also think, by the way, it's a very clever marketing move to give your IDE a feature that all of the people who give conference talks or streams or videos can really make good use of. I think that was really clever. Another thing that I tend to use a lot, or rather that I recommend a whole lot more even than I use it, is this find action, where you just hit Control-Shift-A, and something pops up, and you can type in whatever action you want to do, and then you can see what the name of the action is, and then you can see whether there's a shortcut. And I think that makes it really easy for new users of IntelliJ, specifically if they came from another IDE and they already know there must be some way to reformat code, right, or to extract a method. These things must exist. I just don't know where to find them, and it's really easy to just hit Control-Shift-A, just start typing the command. Maybe you have to fiddle a little bit to find it. Once you found it, you can not only execute the action, you can also immediately see what the shortcut for that is. So in the future, you will know that to reformat code, I don't know, it's muscle memory, something L, who knows? So yeah, so I think find action is very, very helpful to me, but even more to people who start using it, IntelliJ. So I recommend it a lot. So a feature I don't use every day, that is the stream analyzer, right? So if you have a Java stream pipeline and you're not quite sure what's going on, you can just set breakpoints in there and try to figure it out. Or you can actually have IntelliJ, I think it runs the pipeline and analyzes it at the same time, and then gives you something that looks a bit like one of these marble diagrams. I'm not entirely sure. The thing is, while I do write a lot of stream pipelines, and I think I could actually benefit from that feature quite a lot, because it's not like they're all, come out perfect immediately. I just used it once to explore it. I don't even know why. So maybe I should use that more often, because I think it could help me. Yeah, so stream pipeline analyzer. Use that if you don't already. I'll do the same. So my most used feature by necessity is something trivial. I had actually to think a bit about this, what I would call a feature, but something I do quite often is just Control-5 to relaunch or re-execute whatever I just did, right? If I'm having a server running, Control-5 relaunches the server. But more often than not, it's tests, right? You just run a bunch of tests, you change some code, Control-F5 just reruns those tests. So I changed some code. That was the first part of the development cycle. Now comes the feedback part of the cycle. So I ask IntelliJ to just redo whatever I just did. As I said, mostly it's executing tests or launching the application. So yeah, I'm not sure whether it qualifies as a feature, but I do use that quite a lot. So has IntelliJ helped me to be happier? In life, I'd say no. I know I'm not trying to be mean here, but it's a cool IDE, but it's just an IDE. Did it help me to be more productive? That's really hard to say. I would guess yes, but I think also we tend to always say yes when we use a tool. Of course, it makes us more productive, because why wouldn't we use it otherwise? But more productive than what? Do I write better or faster code than back when I used Eclipse? I don't know. What I can say, though, is that I enjoy using it a lot. So one of the reasons for that is, as I mentioned earlier, is the focus on it being an editor. That really gives me I think that focus makes it more fun to use in certain situations where you realize that it's well thought out and things just click together. As I mentioned, also the good support of new Java features, that makes it really comfortable for me. And when I have to experiment with a new Java feature and I launch IntelliJ and already supports it, then that's just fun. It's just easier for me to use it. So I would say I have a marginally better time while I'm in the IDE than when I did back with Eclipse. I'm not sure, as I mentioned, whether I'm happier or more productive, but it's a tool I use every day and that I enjoy using. And we know that we don't say that about a lot of tools. So props to IntelliJ for that. So what else? I like the role that JetBrains plays in the wider Java ecosystem. We have the Java community, and the Java ecosystem is full of very, very different players, right? We have companies from as large as Google and Oracle down to just individuals who are using the language or its tools, and we have companies all in between. And I think JetBrains, together with other companies that support tools, play an important role because they present a specific point of view onto the Java ecosystem. And I feel personally that JetBrains is doing a good job there, keeping the target audience, meaning the developers, on the top of their priority list, and then trying to improve their life or their daily life when working with this. And but also, Tage Walle, for example, works for JetBrains, who's working on the IntelliJ support for specifically new Java language features. And I'm sure there are lots of other people at JetBrains who have a similar role that he has. But he's not only doing that; he's also active on the mailing list. He gives feedback there, so he's like a conduit between the development process of Java and then the development process of the IDE. And I think, once again, that's not a unique identifier of JetBrains. Other companies do the same thing, and I think those are very important roles to not only develop your tool and sell it, but to keep in mind how it is impacted by new developments of the Java language, of the Java platform, and then give that feedback back to those development processes, and have a closer knit community between Java, the platform or language that is being developed, and the tools that are built on top of it. These cannot be separated, and JetBrains is one of the companies that keeps these things close together. And I really appreciate that a lot.